Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles.
from Valves and More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 260, we're going to do a review of the best of the available vintage tubes in the store. And of course, the reason for that is our big fall sale. It started already actually this morning. And if you're a returning customer, in either store, you'll be getting or have just received an email blast from us that gives you a discount code.
And just in case you haven't gotten that, we'll give it to you at the end of the episode here too.
Yeah, and I'll even put it below the video as well. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, we've got quite a lineup of tubes. We're going to try to move really quickly through them. What we're going to show you is the best of the best that we've got in stock. A lot of them are new old stock, and when they're not, we'll talk a little bit about that and the availability. And best of all, we've restocked some of the highest demand 6SN7s you could imagine. And yes, they are brown based, and I think we even have some bad boys.
Yep.
Oh no, we don't. I goofed that up. We thought we did.
Yeah, we couldn't actually make any pairs, unfortunately. But if you needed a single, you could send us a message.
Yeah. Okay, Charles, so what's up first? Are we going to start at the beginning of an amplifier with the rectifiers and move our way all the way through to the power tubes?
Yep, but we're going to move really quick here. Okay, so rectifiers, 5AR4s. We have 3 different versions here, and all of them are made in Japan. Starting from this side, we've got a lovely Toshiba 5AR4.
Now, most people probably know the 5AR4 by its other name.
The GZ34. And here we've got a Matsushita, and these were actually made on later Mullard Phillips tooling, which is really nice.
Those have been very popular.
And this is the NEC version of it as well, the 5GK20, I think it's called.
And is there a difference in spec between that and the GZ34?
Nope, it's identical. And as you can see by their current numbers, they're testing pretty much the exact same as well, 145, 146 milliamps. So we've got new old stock versions of all 3 of these tubes in the store, and they are ready to go. They're fantastic vintage quality 5AR4s.
And we also developed a proper rectifier tester, didn't we? So that we could test them at their normal...
at their proper operating point, because you would be surprised at how badly vintage testers actually test these. It's nowhere close to what they're supposed to be running at. So these are actually properly tested, and they should work beautifully in your amps. Let's go take a look at some preamp tubes next.
Okay, it's going to take us a couple of shots to get through all of the 6SN and 12SN7s. So why don't we start with the brown bases. So we've got some Sylvanias and some tung-sols, and this is one of the best of the mil-spec GTA types. They're called WGTs, and they're back-to-back black T-plates with a single support rod, and they're just superb tubes. They've got a nice, warm, rich mid-range. They're low noise, and they're really well balanced. So you get a lot of detail along with a nice warm tone out of them, and
not to mention an absolutely beautiful looking tube as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a couple of those. They're new old stock, and we've got 3 pairs of new old stock tongues, but one of the pairs has a little crack. So it's in the store as a good used tube. I couldn't even get the crack to open up, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. You can see the labels look a little worn, but in fact, if you just touch them, that printing will just fall right off. So that's really why they're losing their print. A lot of 75-year-old tubes will have the printing just literally just falling off because of the age of the paint.
Yeah, so this pair that has the worn labels, one of them has that really tiny crack. They're in there as used, but we have these absolutely beautiful looking two new old stock pairs as well.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably the rarest tube that we sell is the Tall Boy tung-sol 6SN7 GTBs, I think they are. And what does the label actually show on it, Charles?
Well, the tops have tung-sol's own number on there. I don't know if I can get that in focus, but they often call them WGTs or WGTAs.
Ah, okay. So these are WGTAs then. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a true mil-spec version of the tube. So essentially, both Sylvania and tung-sol took what was a consumer tube or a version of a consumer tube and mil-spec'd it up. And in the case of Sylvania, they put a support rod. In the case of tung-sol, we don't know if they updated the filament or not. The only thing we do know is that the brown base tongues tend to test better than the regular consumer tube.
So they may have been selected as well, for all we know.
Yeah, it's very possible. And tung-sol was one of the very best of the vintage tube manufacturers ever. And of course, they were based in the U.S. And they just did a really excellent job. The only problem with tongues is that they just didn't make that many tubes.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so these are all U.S. production, and that means that all of these are U.S. tariff exempt for our U.S. customers. And let's go take a look at some 12SN7s next.
Okay, now if you happen to be running the our Universal 6 or 12SN7 kit preamp, which can take both the 6SN7 and the 12SN7 preamp tube, then you're golden because we still actually have excellent inventory for 12SN7s. And, you know, since we developed the Universal line of kits years ago now, other manufacturers have come along and have put universal transformers or the ability to switch over from a 6-volt filament to a 12-volt filament. And I think that's just fantastic. I wish more people would copy that because as 6SN7s and 6SL7s and other very standard 6-volt tubes essentially go extinct because there's just so much demand
and they're obviously not making them anymore.
No. Well, the last year of production was what? I think we saw a Sylvania 6SL7 WGT, which we will look at in a minute. I think we saw a date for it in 1985.
Yeah, maybe 86, yeah. But
which might be the very last date that the plant ever made a tube. Mm-hmm. And that was the last of the North American plants to close.
Yeah. So here we've got actually a couple of Sylvanias. We have another brown base. We've shown these guys off plenty of times before, but they are fantastic late version 12SN7 GT, GTAs, I think, technically.
Yeah, so this is basically the second generation of the GTA. Mm-hmm. And it's an incredibly good sounding 12SN7, and it's extremely reliable with low noise. It's just a perfect tube.
Yeah, and then we have its much earlier ancestor, the 12SN7 GT Bad Boy, with that big flashing on the bottom there. And unlike the 6SN7 version, we actually have a number of pairs of these that are left.
Yeah, not that many, but we have new old stock. And do we have any good used?
I think we have both, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
And then over here we have a really neat looking GE. We love GE 6SN7 and 12SN7 tubes, and this is a very late production coin base with a top filament getter. So it's very unique looking. It's going to have a beautiful glow to it, and GE tubes just sound great and work great in just about every spot.
Yeah, and they're very reasonably priced as well. So yeah, that's another good tube. Okay, well, let's see what's next.
Okay, so just like with our 6SN7 and 12SN7 universal preamp, we have our 6 or 12 SL7 phono preamp, and we have some great options for that too. So over here, we have one of our more popular 6SL7 tubes. This is the WGT. They come in black and brown bases, and these are fantastic late production 6SL7s.
Very high gain, about 20 roughly 20% over the standard 6SL7.
And very quiet, very low microphonics. They're great if you need a little bit more gain in your system.
And we've been very lucky. Charles has been able to find true new old stock, new in the box. In fact, we were mentioning earlier that we had a box dated 1986. That's the latest I think we've ever seen a Sylvania, or any tube for that matter, from that second tube era, dated. Now, it's possible that the order from the U.S. military came out, and they just had made a whole bunch of inventory before the plant closed in 1982 or 3, and in fact they just put a current date on it. In fact, that box, if you roll it over, Charles, it's actually so late it's got a barcode on it.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that was added later, who knows. But being able to find high gain tubes, new old stock, new in the box, means that there's a very good chance that we'll have a low noise tube. And with high gain tubes, that's a huge issue. It doesn't matter if the tube was made in 1940 or it was just made yesterday. High gain tubes suffer from noise issues, because even the tiniest little bit of noise due to a construction error or
age or anything like that, cathode coating degenerating, it'll get amplified and come right through.
Yeah.
So next to it here, we actually have another 6SL7. This is a really rare tung-sol black glass.
I don't think we have more than one pair.
We have one pair of the 6SL7 version of these guys. They're incredibly rare. We don't see them pop up very often. And, the 6SN7 version of this tube is practically unobtainable now. But we also have the 12-volt version of the exact same tube. Everything is the exact same, except it takes a 12-volt filament. And we actually, I think, have 2 or 3 pairs of these guys. And this is new old stock, whereas these ones are good used, but they're testing around the new old stock range. And then in the middle of them, we have the 6SL or 12SL version of the bad boy. So same idea with the construction. We have that tall bottle. We have the gigantic bottom plate getter when flashing here. Yeah. And these are also incredibly rare to find without them being noisy or microphonic in the 6-volt version. But as a 12-volt, we can still get them in as new old stock, and that gives them a much better chance of being cleared and sent out to our customers.
Yeah. And now, one thing you may have noticed is that we don't show off boxes that often. And the reason for that is because when we're looking at a tube that was made 70, 75, 80 years ago, there's a very good chance that when we got the tube, it came in a box. The problem is the box literally just fell apart when we started looking at it.
Yeah. And
there's just no way to keep it around. It's the cardboard is deteriorating and the particles are floating in the air. So when we do have a vintage box in reasonably good shape, we always supply it.
Yeah, even this one here, this is one of the last production boxes you'll get, and this is 40 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And these edges wear out, these flaps wear out, and as you get older, they fall apart, they disintegrate.
Okay, well, what's next, Charles? How about some small signal tubes? Let's start with the 12AU7, which is like the 6SN7, which predated it. The 12AU7 was a real workhorse in many, many circuits. Anytime you've got a medium U or medium gain twin triode, so 2 tubes in one bottle, you've got a workhorse. And there's lots of variations to the 12AU7, but let's start with the one that we sell a lot of, and that is the RCA clear top. And we've got them good used and new old stock, new in the box. And we got really lucky. A couple of years ago, one of our regular suppliers found sleeves of these, and we bought them all. It was a huge investment, but over time it slowly pays. We slowly get paid back. Mm-hmm. Now, if we don't have a vintage box or a nice vintage box to ship the tubes in, we've been really lucky. We found a supplier who has these nice vintage-looking cardboard boxes that are sturdy, and they're oversized for the 9 pins, and the one the box we use for the octal tubes, mostly for 6SN7s, is also oversized, and that allows us to put a nice little bit of padding around the tube and makes for safer shipping. So what else have you got after the clear tops, Charles?
Okay, well, first of all of these are US tubes. So just like the 6SL7 and 12SL7s we were just looking at, these are all tariff exempt as well. And so we have a couple of GE tubes, and we were just looking at these recently. And here we have the 5814 or 5814A. That's one of these military industrial extra tough triple mica versions that they've made.
And they called it a 5-star as well, so that was their premium consumer line as well.
Mm-hmm. And then next to it, we have I believe this is the 6189. Yep, there it is right there, 6189. This is another industrial version made by GE. And you can tell it's GE because it's got the GE dots on here. And we have beautiful tight matched versions of both of these. They're in the store as used, but we suspect that they were either new old stock and they just lost their boxes, or that they were lightly used pulls, because they're all testing beautifully. And then over here we have a couple Sylvania versions of the same types of tubes. We have a 5814 made by Sylvania.
Well, hang on, let's back up for a second. You said lightly used pulls. What in the world is a pull?
A pull is a tube that was installed in a piece of equipment and then it was taken out. And at the end of the tube era, or the second tube era, if you want to be more specific, there was a lot of equipment that just didn't get used.
And a lot of it was military equipment, and it was just parked in warehouses.
Sat in a warehouse, and then eventually somebody decided to scrap it, and maybe the tubes were pulled and saved. And we see a lot of that.
Yeah, so essentially we have a brand new tube and a piece of brand new gear.
It may have been powered up a few times to test the gear and make sure the tube was working correctly, and that's just about it.
And that's probably our best source these days is military pulls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and over here we have another 12AU7 equivalent, the 5963, made by Sylvania. And these are all wonderful tubes. They're good testing. We have tight matches available on them, and they're all U.S. made.
Well, that helps a lot with tariffs, that's for sure. Okay, well, let's see what's next. Okay, so what's one of the highest demand tubes out there, Charles?
The 12AX7.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of gear that needs 12AX7s, and the biggest problem with the 12AX7 is it tends to be a very flat, neutral sounding type of tube, very much like the 12AU7 as well. It's got to have something to do with the 9-pin construction. But there are exceptions to the rule, and one of the great exceptions was the vintage Mullard 12AX7, but they had problems. They didn't make that many of them, and the ones that they did make tended to be noisy, so a lot of them got lost to noise issues, and they're basically an extinct tube now. But
Matsushita made them on the Mullard tooling.
So the tubes, the Matsushitas look very much identically like the construction of the vintage Mullards, sound very much like them, and the really great thing is that Japanese manufacturing has always been superior in my view for most products that they make, and vintage tubes are no exception. They did a superb job on these high gain tubes.
And they're very rarely noisy or microphonic. They test very consistent, and they're fantastic tubes. So we have these in the store as new and used. And for all of you guitar and instrument players out there, we also have some discounted ones with mismatched sections that are on for a really good deal. And even though these are Japanese tubes, they will have a tariff on them for our U.S. customers, but it is considerably lower than a lot of the other ones that are out there. And over here we have another Japanese 12AX7 equivalent. This is the 12R-HH14 by NEC.
Which is slightly lower gain.
Slightly lower gain, but the really neat thing about NEC is that their production was all set up by Western Electric. And Western Electric had a version of this tube that it looks like they either licensed or they gave the designs to NEC for, and So this is essentially a sort of a Western Electric close equivalent to a 12AX7. And they are really, really wonderful sounding. And if you have too much gain in your system, this can help soften it out.
Yeah, the only problem with the NEC tubes is that we really don't see very many of them.
No, we have a number of them that are in stock right now, but we haven't been able to find any for quite some time, so these probably won't last very long.
Okay, up next are power tubes, and I think first up are the RFTs, eh, Charles?
Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't have any U.S.-made EL34s. There's some options that are out there. We can't find any of them in really any decent quantities.
And even, Sylvania made a version of it, but it wasn't actually a true EL34. It was just essentially, it was a fake EL34 is what it was.
No, it was a 60A7, and it's technically should be compatible across almost everything these days. But let's show you what we do have. So over here we've got the RFTs, which are fantastic German production EL34s. They're reliable, they're consistent, they sound great.
They have excellent detail. And we can still, until recently, you could still find them new old stock. And unfortunately, the inventory is drying up.
It is. But we do still have really nice quads of them that are in here that are just testing absolutely beautifully. We have spares for those quads, which we always recommend. And you can't go wrong with these for a vintage tube. They are just rock solid, reliable workhorses. They always test above what a new old stock tube should, and that should mean that they're going to be very long lived.
And because they weren't made in China or in Russia, the tariff rate on them for our U.S. customers, even though there are tariffs, is going to be very reasonable. Okay, up next is another of our favorite EL34s, the True SED. That's Svetlana Electronic Devices.
And unfortunately, this is one that U.S. customers are going to have to avoid, even though it's a fantastic tube, because there's going to be very high tariffs on this.
Yeah, I think currently it's sitting at 100%, so you just don't buy them if you're in the U.S.
Yeah, but for the rest of the customers around the world, if you're looking for a very nice, warm EL34...
And you can't afford the Mullards, which we will be looking at in just a minute.
The Svetlanas are excellent options. The true original St. Petersburg ones, you can tell by these tines up here.
Yeah, so caution everyone, of all the power tubes that have been copied and faked and reissued, this is the worst of them. And... some of the copies are so good it takes us a couple of minutes to actually discern whether it's the real deal or a fake.
But those top tines are usually the quick giveaway, though.
Yeah, and the big problem is that if it's not the real St. Petersburg Svetlana, they just aren't the same tube at all. They don't sound anything like the same tube.
Yeah.
You'll see comments. I remember when I did this research years ago, I would see comments and people would say, "What gives with the Svetlanas? They suck." Yeah. And somebody would say, "Well, you probably don't have the real ones."
Yeah.
And sure enough, you'd read further down in the comments, and they'd put a picture up, and they would be, a later production fake, and which is a shame. But yeah, we still have some true. New old stock SEDs, which is amazing. Okay, what's the greatest EL34 ever made? Well, everybody can chant with me. XF2s. They were the second generation Mullard / Phillips EL34. Mullard and Phillips invented the type. They also invented the later smaller bottle version of it, the EL84, and that second generation, the XF2s, are simply superb tubes, and they are now getting rare, unfortunately. And we're blessed to actually still have. We specialized in these tubes for years and years, and we still, I think, have a couple of matched quads
of new old stock tubes. Yeah. I mean, our stock is going up and down and up and down. I mean, they're coming in singles, and we're matching up what we can.
But lately, I normally do the Mullard buying, and I'm not finding any.
Yeah.
I mean, there's actually quite a few singles and pairs and even quads for sale, but they're garbage. You can tell that they're completely worn out, and the way you can tell that is you can look at the bases and pins to see how much wear, but look at the gettering. If the gettering is not full and solid like this, if it's fading away, That's a high hour tube, and you don't want that.
Yeah. And this is actually a matched quad plus spare of new old stock tubes. And we always recommend getting spares, especially for tubes that are like this, where they're getting rarer and harder to find. Because if you have one of your quad fail and you don't have a spare, then the quad's useless at that point.
Yeah. Now, with any luck, we keep records for every single tube we've ever sold. Now, hopefully we don't get requests going back too many years, because that's a deep dive into the warehouse. But we can look up your tube order, and if your quad is not too old and worn out, we can probably find you a decent match. But if you buy the match spare at the time of purchase and occasionally rotate the spare through the quad, you'll have that quad for years. And best of all, the Mullards were made in the UK, and the UK has a reasonable tariff rate to the US. So you might see us talking, or have caught on that we've talked about the source country of manufacture. And in the case of our US customers, it's not where the tube was boxed, where it was shipped from today,
or even what the label says on it.
Yeah, it's where it was actually manufactured, that country. And now, in the case of the UK, the United Kingdom, that's easy because it's stayed relatively static as a country. But all sorts of countries around the world have changed since they were manufactured. So it gives a slight bit of flexibility on the declaration, but it still is very problematic. Yeah. So, okay, well, let's move on to bigger power tubes. Okay, so we've got a slightly lower powered version of the KT88 made by SED. So these are Svetlanas, and they're just excellent tubes. The biggest problem with the 6550 and its higher powered cousin, the KT88, and later on the KT120, which was never a vintage tube. It's a modern tube. I think there's even a KT180.
And 150 too.
Is there? Those tubes never existed in the vintage era. They're just modern creations mostly out of China, but I think some of them are made in Slovakia and in Russia. Those tubes all tended to have a really very flat neutral mid-range, and I don't think it was necessarily the manufacturer. It's just the type of tube, the way the actual tube is assembled as part of its design. And the wonderful thing about Svetlana out of St. Petersburg is that they tended to have a nice touch of warmth in the mids. And that makes all the difference in the world, in my opinion, when it comes to, really enjoying your music. These 6550s are simply a perfect match for R8 owners. Yes, the R8 can take a KT88, but a vintage KT88 is basically a rare beast these days, and very expensive. And the really interesting thing is that most people don't realize that the R8 was actually really an EL34 amp. And with a switch, you can bring in a 6550, and at that voltage, you're getting the power that the 6550 was designed for, but you're not getting the power that the KT88 was designed for, because you just don't have the plate voltage. So this is an excellent option, and we still have, I think we have quite a few new old stock quads.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to find a good source of them a while ago, and these are great tubes. Unfortunately, not again for our American friends because of the tariffs, but for everybody else around the world, these are great tubes.
And it just so happens they're on sale. And we're running the fall sale as well, and you're allowed to double dip. So you can grab them at their sale price, and you can go ahead and take a discount code on top. So you can double dip. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are some great power tubes for you there.
Yeah, and I highly recommend getting a spare while we have them, because we used to be able to find quite a few of them. I was even bringing in case lots occasionally, and I can almost never find them anymore.
Those days are over.
Yeah. Back in the day, among vintage power tubes, the KT88 was at one time one of the most powerful power tubes used domestically in home systems. And they, because of the high-powered amps they were run in, they just didn't last that long. I mean, they're not a short-lived tube, but you're not also going to run a KT88 for a decade in your amp, and yeah, you won't. They just don't last that long.
They're high current, they're power tubes, and power tubes just don't last that long.
Yeah, particularly the higher powered versions. And these are some of the best KT88s ever made. These are SEDs, so there's Svetlanas, and they are wonderful sounding tubes. And where they really excel is that touch of warmth in the mids, but they also really do an extremely good job in the lower frequencies. So the bass notes that come off of these tubes, and I don't mean thumpa bass, I mean articulate, detailed, with excellent transients. I don't know if everybody out there has a system that does the low frequencies really well. It's in modern speaker systems, most of them really suck at doing the low frequencies. And when you fill in those low frequencies with really excellent reproduction, it's like all the rest of the music in the recording comes alive. It's just really surprising to hear it. So I think we've got a couple of excellent used quads.
Yep, including one with a spare.
Yeah, yeah. And, I was just talking about how power tubes, especially high-powered tubes, don't last that long. And if you buy a spare for any power tube quad, the higher-powered versions like the KT88, it's almost essential.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are, they look almost identical to the 6550s we were just looking at, but you can tell it's got a slightly fatter bottle on it. It's got some extra support.
And it's got an extra third mic on top.
Yeah. And these are just meant for some more current, some more watts.
Excellent. Okay, and we almost never see these. I think we have historically we've sold roughly 4 quads a year, and we're literally not finding any new ones coming in. So. Yeah. I would say they're endangered. They're not extinct yet because we actually still have some quads in the bin. But now is the time, if you've ever wanted the best KT8 ever made, grab a discount and grab a quad and spare. And yeah, because you probably won't see them again. And unfortunately, if you're in the US, you simply can't buy these. The tariff rate on Russian-made tubes is incredible. Okay, what's next? We were taking a look at the really high-demand, high-value tubes, but the store is actually filled with a lot of other types of tubes. And the 6AS7, which is really popular in OTL amps.
We even use it in our own.
Yeah, is a good example of that. We have excellent inventory. And Charles just pulled out 2 of the very best.
Yeah, these are my favorites. They're the NEC-made 6AS7. That's just the early version of the 6080. And in my opinion, these are the best sounding ones out of all the ones that I've listened to.
Yeah, and they're not, NEC didn't make huge quantities of tubes. A lot like the company that set up their tooling, Western Electric, which is a real shame, but we're glad to have the tubes we do have. Now, if there's anything in the higher demand tubes that you're interested in, make sure you grab them quickly because we were showing a lot of the inventory we actually have in stock. We don't have reserves. We have a lot of singles, but not a lot of matched pairs. And if you stay to the very end, here's the Black Friday discount code that'll get you 15% off the entire store. Black Friday 15. And if your order is $150 or more after discount, the shipping's on us, folks. And the sale runs for a little bit over a week. So it starts today. That's Friday, November the 14th, and it ends on Sunday, November the 23rd. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.